I am Jonathan Bowlby and this is my 1968 Camaro SS 568 with a 671 blower on. 17, 16, I've passed my test and I've been mad from cars from the word go. I've always had sort of really tried to get me high-end cars as possible. I've had Toyota Supras, Celicas, I even had an Aston Martin at one point, and then I went to GTRs. After a while, it eats all your money away. And the more expensive the cars, the more expensive to run. So one year decided, right, I'm going to get rid, and I decided to sell two cars and just buy a classic car. And that's basically how I got to this car. I had a Mustang GT 500 2011 version. I also had a GTR, and it was just, like I say, too much money to keep both. Enough's enough. Looked at the classic car market, noticed how cheap it was to buy and insure and keep. So that was basically, after all these years of motoring, that was my decision I made to get this sort of vehicle. Got interested in the Camaros as my friend George Atsianis, who lives in Florida, bought a motorcycle for a 1967 Camaro. Went over on holiday, went for a look at it, was just in awe over it. It was really nice. I've never looked at them before, to be honest with you. 6 months later, I found one in Virginia. Did the worst thing that anybody ever does, and that's to buy blind off eBay. Bought it off eBay from a guy in Virginia, paid for it, and he actually brought it down to my friends in Florida, where it then got shipped from Miami, basically back to Southampton. And that's where I picked it up. And then when it came to me, bit of a shock, because it never is what it says on the packet, and plenty of rust issues, plenty of parts missing, but the basic bones were there, and that's what I loved about the car. It were already pro street anyway. It were an X-Drag car, and it had been tubbed. It got the the right size axle, the wheels, everything was just right for it. So it just really wanted a good overall, and basically doing how I'd got it as a picture in my head. So that's where I started. So the car wasn't actually that bad exterior wise. Paint wise, it was what they call in America a 6-foot paint job, which basically means it looks fine from a distance, but you get up close and it's a terrible sort of state of affairs. The paint job when it came was a candy apple red, a brandy wine red sort of, and it would have been a really nice paint job if they'd have spent that little bit extra time on it. House of Colours paint that were on it. So it was an expensive paint job, but like I say, rush sort of paint job, and so it was redone by my friend. We then came to a conclusion of which colour to do it, and this is actually a Range Rover blue. So that's where it is from the paint job. But body-wise, apart from a little bit of rust at the bottom of one of the doors, the body was fine. So it was just basically flattened down, a prime and a respray. Fortunately for the car, it was all really well undersealed. I spent a full week under the car scraping the underside of the car. Revealed obviously a little bits of rust, but not too bad. And then the rest of the things like the chrome wear, the bumpers, etc., were brand new to the car anyway when I bought it. And obviously the other parts that, the shiny chrome parts, I've put on as extras, because when it came, it was just basically a stock sort of X-Drag car that had been put back on the road, and just basically, there were no handbrake, there were no turn signals, there were no wipers. It was just basically straight from the strip onto the road, just to make it as legal as without spending a lot of money. So that's where I then came in and just finished it off with all the chrome parts, and it's one thing led to another, and unfortunately you buy one and you just got to buy another one, and it just sort of tumbles into that sort of, so it looks better, then I'll buy it. But the engine, when it first came, it came with a 396, which came out of a 72 Chevy. The car was finished probably about a year ago, and I took it out and I started basically just driving it. It didn't feel, the engine wasn't good enough for the car, for me. It wasn't a fast engine. You put your foot down and you were basically just waiting for something to happen. It's a good cruising engine, but it wasn't what I was after. I wanted something a bit more aggressive, and found a new block, which were a 678. It had all been rehomed, and we'd had new shells put in, new piston rings, and basically built the block up from scratch. I've then invested in a blower, which was just an afterthought, to be honest with you. And I've always wanted a blown car with a scoop coming out the bonnet. The blower came from Muniam blowers in California. We then got it over during pandemic, which took obviously a lot longer. To that, you know, apart from my friend Granville and his friend Angelo, who built the engine together, we then put the engine back together within sort of a week. It was in the car and fired up. Finish it off with a dual EFI from Holly, which again are an absolutely fantastic piece of the kit. This is the fourth one I've had now on an EFI. I've had carburettor cars, and it's an instant sort of start up. It's really good when the engines are cold, and self-learning EFI. You know, I think it looks the car, it finishes it properly, and it does run a lot better than a carburettor. I still haven't had it on a rolling road, so we're still waiting to see what the HP is going to be and the top speed. But apart from that, the engine-wise, as it runs at the moment, it's fantastic. Basically pulled everything out of the interior except for the dashboard. The clocks are all Dakota digital. The dash pad was a new pad. All the carpets, I've got a friend that lays carpet. He actually laid all black car carpets into the car. I then bought a couple of Cobra seats from the local car shop. Sold the other parts that were left that were in the car, and just replaced basically as much as I could, but kept keeping it original with new parts, because the parts that were in it were all quite well worn or ripped or torn or scratched. So it was just a case of replacing parts that I wanted to keep as a originality, but also keep it with a Pro Street look, hence the bucket seats, and 4-point harness. You know, so it just wanted that sort of just clean looking. That's all I wanted, but I also wanted it brand new. So when I got in the car, it smelt like a new car, or as much as it could do anyway. It were all dynamatted as well, to try and keep noise out, which is a bit pointless when you've got side pipes. But it does make the car feel better. The roll cage was in the car when I bought it. It had been cut out, because usually on a roll cage, the side bars that come out, they'd already been pre-cut out, to be honest with you, from doing drag racing. Obviously, ease of getting in and out of the seats. So that was basically in. All I did was repainted it all, because it was just basic raw steel. The nitrous bottles, they went in. We were originally going to run nitrous on the original engine that was in the car. I bought the plates and everything for it. It were all piped up for it. I then put the twin bottles in the back. It didn't get to that stage because during winter then I just got the idea of swapping the engine. So the other engine just came straight out of the car. As I found a new block, we pulled the engine straight out. So that was it. There was no going back. So the nitrous were there, but it never got used. So it's just now for show is the nitrous. The rear wheels are 30 by 15. They came with Mickey Thompson's on. They're a big wide drag tyre, obviously it sat on a narrowed axle. I swapped those over, as I did with the front ones, to Uza street legal radials. The street legal radials are slightly smaller, so the rear ones now are 29s by 15. Again, still a wide tyre. There's a lot of meat on those. Basically, the front ones are just skinnies. All sat on Weld 5-spoke chrome Pro Stars. And the tyres at the time cost me, for all four, shipped from the States, about £1,000. Now, this 2022, the rear tyres alone, one of the rears is £800 just for one, and they've stopped actually making them at the moment, so there's a shortage of them. They aren't actually starting to produce them because of raw materials, so they're knocked off obviously the slow tyre making numbers. So the rear tyres, like I say, are just starting to come back into production, but yeah, they've trebled in price. So luckily I got them when I did. But started the car up for the first time, all nice and shiny engine, everything brand new. I'd actually put some exhaust wadding on the headers. Now, obviously with a blown car, it gets extremely hot, more than a normal aspirated car. So we started it up, we're waiting for it to get up to temperature. During that time, it got up to about 160 degrees, and the hose off the radiator blew off the bottom hose. It sprayed the car obviously with water everywhere, which went straight into the headers. Now the steam just obviously you couldn't see anything, switched the engine off. Now within the water is obviously a antifreeze. Now we didn't realise this till after we thought about it. What had happened is the water had hit the headers onto the exhaust wadding, and it had burnt or should I say boiled the water off. But antifreeze has got like an alcohol base in it, and it actually basically neatened it down to just alcohol in the headers. Now the headers must have been red hot, and the headers set on fire. Obviously this was just a bit of a shock, and especially because the car was, like I say, it was brand new, everything was polished, everything was, so it was a bit heartbreaking. I had to run for the fire extinguisher and just put out the exhaust basically on the car. But just to pre-warn, we've never known that. And my friend who's built the car with me, he's been a mechanic for over 60 years, and he's never seen it. So just as a pre-warning, alcohol does burn off if it hits the headers, and especially if you've got wadding on, it'll stay and actually ignite, and that's what happened. The fire didn't catch the car. Luckily there was no bonnet on, so it was just all internal. But just one side of the engine, I spent days and days cleaning back up. Luckily, it cleaned up really easily and quickly. So I think it's just the overall car itself I'm proud of, and obviously a lot of thanks to Granville Walker who helped me build it. A lot of thanks to Angelo as well, who built the engine. Without Granville, I wouldn't, and probably never would have built the car, because I'm not a mechanic at heart. And luckily, he just approached me one day and said, look, if you get one, I will help you, no problem. And he probably did it for about 18 months, just nearly every day, coming up and tinkering. And so with a lot of help with somebody that's really knowledgeable, it's, anything's achievable. Like I said, this car was a runner when it came, but not what it is today. It's chalk and cheese what it was today. So that's just the overall achievement of having the car full stop as it is now. I drive it as much as I can, to be honest with you. If it's like this, I'll go out, even if it's for an hour. And it's more, the driving experience is good, don't get me wrong, but after a while, once you spoil with new cars, it's one of those things that you've got to love. If you don't love it, you're going to hate it. My wife's been out once with me, and she's not interested in going out again. I went from a 2011 GT500 to a 68 Camaro, and I forgot that obviously everything's rattling, everything's hard, everything's noisy. The good thing about it is all the reaction you get from the people. That makes up for everything, because obviously they see what you can't see. They're seeing the car going down the road. It's usually the car that's got the most people around, and that's how we usually find it when I've been walking around shows. If you go, we've just been to a show at the weekend, and I went with my daughter, and she actually did say, she says, oh, we can see where your car is, Dad, because there's more people around that area. And we walked over, and that's how it usually goes. But I think it's more, like I say, you see a lot of Mustangs at car shows. You don't see a lot of Camaros. The difference between my car and the Mustang crowd, it just makes it's just separate, and it looks different. And I think that's what people like about it. When I was looking for a Camaro, I actually was looking for a 69 Camaro, and I wanted it red and black. But when you start looking for Camaros, you tend to find that all the 69s are nearly twice the price of the 67s and 68s. Unfortunately, it's the more desirable shape and style. So I was looking, I messaged dealer after dealer, I looked on ebay.com, which is everything in the States, and everyone was really high end, price-wise. So I started looking at the other models and thought, well, the 68 is the cheaper one, because it just seemed to be the one that people don't shy to as much as the 67, with it being the first, and the 69 has been the last, and the better body style. That's what everybody seems to think. But the 68 is obviously just a jump up from the 67, loses the windows, ventilation windows on the front, and obviously the grille's slightly different. Although I put an RS front grille on mine, which I did prefer anyway. With it not being a true SS car, I just made it as I wanted it, and that's basically as it went. So originally it was going to be a 69 with a red with black stripes. I've now got a 68 with blue with white stripes. So not at all what I envisioned, but it's still a nice car that I'll love, and I wouldn't get rid of it unless somebody offered me silly money. It's just one of those things that you keep, and it'll just grow in price, and you know, it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg to keep. And that's the beauty of the old scene. It doesn't cost a lot. There's no tax. There's no MOT. You know, you've got it in fuel, but that's just miles per gallon. So that's my review of what I achieved, and you know, what I've ended up with, and I'm quite happy with it.